You're listening to the Ordinary Joe's podcast with Joe D and Eric B.
Welcome, everyone. We are the Wait, what are we doing? I am Eric B.
And I'm Joe D, and we are
The
the
Ordinary
Ordinary
Joes.
Joes.
Hey, we're getting a little closer.
Yeah, look at that.
A little closer. We didn't have a show out last week. We were occupied. I think it was the first game of the NFL season is the reason why we were occupied. It's the reason why I was occupied.
I think there's a lot of things stopped last week because of football.
Football stopped. And today, football should have stopped with all the injuries. But we'll get to that another day. Today's topic, we are going to discuss the history of, I guess you can call it rap and hip hop, right?
Yeah.
And the cool thing about this is Joe from New York originated New York hip hop. I started listening to hip hop with New York type rappers, old days like Run DMC and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna dive into that today, and we're gonna do this. I'm gonna let Joe start because again, he grew up in New York, so let's hear what he has to say.
Yeah, I mean, this is a topic close to my heart because I grew up, like Eric said, in New York, in the Bronx, where it started literally. Like I was born in 1980, so I'd say that right about that time is when the sound that we know as rap is already kind of full swing. So yeah, I mean, I grew up, my older brothers breakdancing in the living room with their friends DJing and literally like drawing and doing graffiti and all that stuff. So like I was immersed in hip hop since.
I'm gonna ask you a question.
Uh-huh.
So the movie Beat Street came out early 80s. Was that was supposedly a description of what New York hip hop was like? So you just mentioned that with your brothers DJing, graffitiing, and that movie was exactly what it was. So can you verify that's how the movie was actually actual to what it was back then?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. It's pretty accurate. I mean, I was little. I was a kid, but I mean, everything you see, like the trains, the subways were just littered with graffiti. I mean, it was just and not like big murals and pieces how you kind of see today. It was just like a school desk. Everybody's tagging up on, you know what I mean? And back then, like I don't know if you've ever heard the term the Bronx was burning. Like, it literally was built like everybody was poor. Landlords were like burning down their buildings to get, insurance money, things like that. Yeah. So, people were throwing parties in these abandoned buildings and like running the power line out of the window like they do in the movie. And
like in the movie, exactly.
Yeah, so it was real, and then you also had the gangs from the 70s, that whole era, like, the movie The Warriors.
Yes.
That was like a real blown up kind of view of how it was, but you did have a bunch of gangs like that in the city.
Wow.
So that was kind of hip hop was coming off of the heels of all that, so it was crazy. It was a crazy time. Excuse me. Yeah.
Nice. And for a lot of people who don't watch or follow hip hop or listen to hip hop music, feel bad for you guys, but from what I read, hip hop originated in the 70s by a Jamaican group, and they brought in their steel band. I'm just reading this off the web. They brought in their steel band or their steel drums and mixed it in with some records scratching in the background. And that's supposedly how hip hop got started. But I think it's more of the, again, you got the DJ who wants to throw in a couple records in the background, who's throwing stuff like this. Well, when he's doing all that stuff while he's mixing. Again, like I grew up listening to, I started listening to, like Run DMC. That we can even go further back. I mean, I think the first guy I listened to was Curtis Blow, and Curtis Blow was managed by Russell Simmons, who is the brother of Run, right? DJ Run. So, so I was listening to a lot of that in the beginning. I mean, like, again, to me, hip hop, when I hear hip hop and a lot of my West Coast family, sorry guys, I'm gonna tell you right now, when I hear hip hop, I hear New York. I mean, I'm not, I'm a West Coast guy. I lived here my whole life. But when I was listening to music, when I was watching breakdancers, you're watching the Rocksteady crew who were breakdancing in the subways of New York.
Yeah.
And yes, that fad came over here to the West Coast, but you have Beat Street and you have breaking.
Yeah. And I mean, early on, the beginning days of rap, it was only in New York. Nobody was rapping anywhere else. So, if you were into it, that's whatever you could get your hands on, whatever you could hear, because it wasn't really even on the radio like that back then. So I can't even imagine before, social media, how it spread the way it did, and back to what you were saying about the beginning, from what I understand, Kool Herc threw technically the first hip hop party back in 1973.
Jeez.
So yeah, 1520 Cedric Avenue. That's actually
I was 1 year old at 73.
Were you really?
I was one in 73.
Yeah. So yeah, it's cool. Like what he was doing was playing like these kind of old school like funk records that they wouldn't play on the radio and stuff like that. And then these radios would have these songs would have a break at some point in it where it'd just be like the drum solo, maybe some percussions and whatever. And what he would do is he would actually take two of the records, and nobody had done this at the time, where he would just continually play the break. He would extend it by switching over to the other record and switching back. So it was just that break that was playing. And that gave birth to the name of breakdancing, because the kids dancing to that music, to that break beat, became breakdancers. And then I think his partner, Coke LaRock, was
Coke LaRock.
Coke LaRock. He used to just shout out like his boys' names in the crowd and rhyme them. And so technically people say that was the first hip hop party. But like I said, all this stuff's up for dispute because you have the is it the first party or the first rapper or the first big name? How do you dispute that? Because then most people are going to hear the first big name to ever do it.
You get someone like Russell Simmons who decides to expand. Russell Simmons back then. If you guys saw the movie Crush Groove, it kind of shows the story of like kind of how, I guess, Run DMC became Run DMC. You had your group like the Fat Boys, even Beastie Boys made a cameo. But that was more like towards the early to mid 80s, right? When Crush Groove came out. I want to know, this is again coming from you, from New York. When did it go from breakdancing to rap? And I mean, like, when you hear breakdancing, you hear your little, everybody knows. You hear a breakdancing song, trust me, your body starts to move. You do the little strut thing, right?
Yeah.
When did Run DMC the first major rap group to take away from that breakdancing era to just start putting words together? And
I would say probably a little. They kind of happened at the same time. I would say like breakdancing and the beginning of rap, because like you had what they call an MC, a master of ceremonies, who wasn't really necessarily rapping yet, but just kind of keeping the crowd and going and stuff like that. But I guess technically, and this is like the stuff that people argue about. Like I think DJ Hollywood, who was like a disco guy back then, but disco kind of hip hop kind of came from disco.
Yeah.
And some people would argue he was probably the first, rapper as we know it. But I mean, I would have to say Run DMC was probably the first huge act. Like the first, act that really, had people looking like from everywhere, not just in New York and maybe not even just in the States. They were huge.
I mean, when you see Japanese guys wearing a Run DMC shirt or King of Rock shirt, they made it big if you're going across the ocean to Japan, and I'm pretty sure Europe had them going out there as well. But I do remember a song by Curtis Blow, and I think it was called The Breaks.
Mhm.
And that song right there, I mean, just the way he was talking about the breaks, and he did his whole little ho 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 ho. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm a little kid, and I'm like, I just got through listening to like, my dad got me listening to like Earth, Wind and Fire. So I was
Nice.
more that R&B guy. And then
Yeah.
when I'm hearing like this guy, I'm like 9 or 10 years old, and this guy is like putting words together, and I'm like, what the hell's what's he saying? But there's a rhythm to the words, right? There's a rhythm to it. There's a beat to it. And then next thing you know, like I'm going to school and I'm asking these kids like, hey, did you guys hear that Curtis Blow guy? And then next, the kids around me, like, where have you been? Kind of thing, like this is the kind of music we listen to. And they're rapping. So it's kind of like,
Come on, Eric.
where have you
You live under a rock?
Curtis Blow is old, man. We're listening to Run DMC now.
Now, where did you hear him on the radio, or did you do you remember how that first experience when you heard it? Or
So that was the problem here for us here in the West Coast, because if you weren't rich, you didn't have MTV, right? And back then you either paid for cable or you didn't have cable, and you just had basic channels. The radio stations out here were playing, again, you had your Olivia Newton-John kind of group, Rick Springfield. It was more that modern rock, or that
right.
that was big back then, and like no radio station took the chance to play any sort of hip hop.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the era where, I'm not gonna lie, I was a break dancer.
Were you really?
I wasn't a Van Damme break dancer, but I was a break dancer. So I grew up in San Francisco, but a lot of the summers I spent time in Daly City. And this is when this whole hip hop thing, B-boy thing started becoming really big for me, is because my cousin lived in the suburbs, and next to him was a DJ group. I mean, he was surrounded by DJ groups, and one group, and I'm gonna throw a shout out to DJ Rock Veray, or back then he was just known as DJ Ray Veray, drove like a Honda. And back then, you were like, whoa, dude, you got a Honda.
Yeah, you got a Honda.
And it wasn't just a regular Honda, it was souped up.
Oh, nice.
And he had, back then they called it skirts, where it makes it ride low.
Right.
And he said, like, I got this DJing, this is the money that I got DJing. We're like, what's DJing? So he had turntables. Remember we called it coffins? It was called a coffin. You had the turntables, you had the mixer, and he was in the back, or he was always in the garage every Saturday morning. You could see his garage is open. We're the little kids riding the bikes, being stupid, and you just hear break beats in the garage. You hear just like little scratching. You'll hear like, and again, it was more East Coast rappers. I didn't hear, any West Coast. I want to say my first West Coast rap group that I heard was probably NWA.
Yeah, same here. I remember actually specifically the first time I heard NWA. I all my friends were a little bit older than me, and I was at my friend's house, and he pulls out another neighbor comes over, and he's like, yeah, I got this tape. He's like, but we got to listen to it in your room. And we're all like huddling under the bunk beds, and I'm like, we're like, what's going on? Like, what is this? And he starts playing it, and I mean, I don't know when this has to have been
85. I want to say around 85 when they first came out. Okay. I know they're definitely in the 80s, but exact what year I don't remember.
Yeah. So I was about 7 the first time, 7 or 8 the first time I heard this. All right, so that kind of paint a picture of how I grew up. All right, and we're listening and sneaking and listening to this, and all I'm hearing is like, fuck, shit. Like that's all I hear, and I'm like, this is great. And I think Eric's battery just went out.
I'm still here. Okay. Go ahead.
And I'm like, yeah, this is amazing, but it was like,
keep talking.
You never heard, anything like it, because you're so used to that New York sound, like those typical like soul samples and those real hard break beats.
All right, sorry about that. Something
Yeah, no worries.
technical difficulties. So
Yeah,
we
but
were
I mean,
talking
like,
about NWA.
yeah, like and like I was saying, like at that time, hearing that it was something completely new, like a new sound, new, and I think that was the pivoting point of when it really made its way around the country, because then the West just, I mean, took off after that with Dre and Snoop and all those guys after,
Yeah.
all the movies,
Oh my God, yeah.
Menace to Society, Boys in the Hood, Ice Cube, all that stuff. I mean, that was,
But that's how West Coast, to me, I mean, that's how West Coast got its name. You mentioned Menace Society, Boys in the Hood. That's all West Coast. And this is why a lot of people on my end gets upset with me, because I understand how rappers in the West Coast came from, neighborhoods where you either rapped or you sold drugs, or you're a drug dealer and you're a rapper. Eazy-E was a drug dealer who just, in the movie funded NWA, right?
yeah.
But in the East, and I'm gonna go back to the East. My heart's in the East Coast when it comes to rap music. Were these guys Were these guys drug dealers? I mean, were they gangbangers the way the West was? I mean, you can't find or hear one West Coast rapper right now, maybe MC Hammer, who's not really a rapper. Can you tell me one? I mean, were they like that? Because the West Coast rappers, if they're not thugs, they're rappers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it was the same in New York, but the I guess gang culture was different, because you didn't have gangs how you had in the West Coast with the Bloods and Crips.
Yeah.
You did, there were different gangs, but it was I don't know, there wasn't, they wouldn't rock colors and flags and things like that. It was just more of like neighborhoods. This neighborhood would be against this one, and
Okay.
maybe they had cliques and things like that. And I think it's kind of similar to, well, I wouldn't say now, but similar to how it was, a few years ago, where like it was definitely influenced by the drug dealers in the neighborhood, and then you had some, rappers who are, did come from that. They funded themselves with that, and then decided to go into the rap game. But the 90s was so heavy with that, that gangster rap, that it was kind of hard to tell who really was living that life and who wasn't, like, until they got arrested for doing something stupid, So, but it was definitely similar. It's just, I think the culture was different. The gang culture was a little different from the East and West Coast.
I mean, like the movie Straight Outta Compton, we all thought, me especially thought, like, you got Ice Cube and Dr. Dre, who were thugs. But then the movie showed that they didn't really live that thug life. They just lived in the neighborhood,
right,
where that's what they saw every day.
Right.
So, Eazy-E's a different story. He did live that thug life. He was the gangbanger out of the group. But it's like in the East, and I keep bringing up the East, it's like back then everybody just wanted to play music. They just wanted to dance. It got a little political towards the mid 80s, I guess, when, like, Chuck D and Public Enemy started coming around. They wanted to use their platform to get the word out, which is, to me, was kind of cool, because Public Enemy had a different style when it came to rap. It's like we're listening to Run DMC. They're talking about Adidas. They're talking about You Be Illin. And then here comes Chuck D, who's talking about, like, this is what they're doing to the man, and they're putting us down. It kind of gave a wake up call, especially in that black culture in the East Coast, which kind of crossed over to the West Coast as well, because, again, in the 80s, we didn't have anything here. We didn't.
Yeah.
We didn't.
When did, I mean, besides, Dr. Dre and NWA and all them, when did rap start really, like, making it to the Bay Area? Like, who would you say was the first big artist from the Bay Area
It would have to be
you guys?
Yeah, it would have to be Too Short. Too Short. Too Short started coming. Yeah, he started, Oakland. But see, when we listen to rap music, like here in the Bay Area, you have, and I'm sure it's the same way in all the states, especially in New York, you have your local rappers that, these are the guys that are like, hey, listen to my CD. They're passing that out of their trunks. Too Short was one of those guys here in the Bay Area. So he was going around Oakland, San Francisco, like, listen to my music. This started in 1985. Okay.
Wow.
1985 is when like the East Coast rap was getting big with, you know, like I said, EPMD was getting big. Russell Simmons just was getting ready to create Def Jam.
Right. LL Cool J.
LL Cool J was big. So here you are in the West Coast, San Francisco, and we're still big on what's going on in the East. You know, we're still listening to it. And you have this local rapper like, hey, listen to my CD. And his style is totally different than what you're used to in the West Coast. I mean, in the East Coast, you know, we're listening to like DJ music. We're listening to, you know, like scratching here in the East Coast type raps. Yeah. And then here's Too Short, who's coming out with a beat like this. It's like, what the hell is this? And that's his song called Life's Too Short. But it's like the beats were different.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you always hear what's better, West or East. You know, East has back then had this totally different type of vibe when it comes to rap music. Their rap music was more something to dance to, where when West Coast rap came out, you just wanted to fight.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. You wanted to fight. I mean, it's like, you know, that's why a lot of people like with me, I still like listening to East Coast rapper. Well, let's put it this way. I like listening to old school East Coast rap.
Okay, I got you.
Because I think, you know, we're going to try to do this podcast more on a 2-part basis right now. We're going to try to stick to the 70s and 80s for you guys who are listening. So don't come to us telling us, you know, Drake this, Drake that. That'll be in another podcast. That's going to be like part 2 or part 3. Yeah,
there's way too much to cover.
We're like 30 minutes in. We're still in the 80s.
Yeah. But I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You know, it's funny you're talking about like Too Short, because as long, you know, he's still one of the first rappers that I can remember. Like, he's been around for a while, because it's not my one. Like I said, I grew up with hip hop around me, but I would say one of the first songs that like I can remember liking, and in fact, my sister helped me memorize the first verse was "It Takes Two" with Rob Bass.
Oh my God!
Right, but at the same time, I remember Too Short song. One of my sisters had the tape and she was playing it, and I heard, and it was when you just played, and like I went running and they wouldn't let me hear it because, you know, he says like, I don't know, like bitch like a million times. So they wouldn't let me listen to it, but I'm like, who's that? And I was already at the point where I wanted to know names. I wanted to know, you know, who was who, because
who's this? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the first in fact that same year, I think that, or maybe a little bit after that Christmas, I got a Walkman, and the first tape that I got, because my sisters knew I was getting into it, was Kid and Play's Too Hype. and Rob and Bobby Brown's classic.
My prerogative.
Yeah, that was. I shouldn't have been listening to that at like 8, but man, that was a classic. I was grooving. If I would have had a woman, it'd been over.
Oh my God! You want to listen to my new Bobby Brown single? Who's Bobby Brown? You heard the new edition, right?
Sipping on a juice box.
But see, again, we'll go back to that. We'll go back to the East versus West, because the East Coast, they put words together with music in the background, you know, with a break here and there and scratching here and there, and they made it work, and everybody loved it. You know, even when you go back to like Eric B. and Rakim, just talking about just hustling, making money, and talking about this is what we got to do to get paid. Paid in Full was one of my favorite songs back in the days.
And that was probably honestly more of what was going on back in New York. Was you had more of people who were on that hustling thing as opposed to the necessarily gang violence. But you know, you got the violence from the hustling because, you know, money's involved in drugs, things like that. But I would say that was probably the main kind of vibe in New York at that time, at least in hip hop and those guys, quote unquote, you know, hood stars. That's what people.
Yeah. And then here in the West Coast, like, you know, going back to the East and West, you had a group by the name of UTFO, and UTFO did a song called Roxanne, Roxanne. And everybody here loved that. I get confused between UTFO and Whistle because they came out at the same time. They have the same kind of style, but it was that kind of rap, like if you guys remember Roxanne, 80's, classic 80's. Here in the West Coast, they came out with two versions. They came out with just the UTFO version, and then they came out with the Roxanne Revenge version, where she was just doing her own thing. And I don't know if you guys did the same thing out there in the East, but there was a DJ out here who put both songs together. So whenever UTFO did she came back with her rebuttal right after that.
Yeah, was that was Roxanne Shante, right? The one that did
how many different Roxannes are there? Yeah, I think it was Roxanne Shante.
I think that was like one of the first kind of like rap beefs or battles, because she did that song, I guess, in answering theirs or something like that.
Yes.
There was some little beef there. So yeah, and that was her name, Roxanne Shante. That's
but see, again, it goes back to they were just having this little beef, not having to say a bad word. And I guess the closest one you had that was kind of, I don't want to say bad, but bad was like LL Cool J, because LL Cool J would say something. The way he wrote his lyrics back then, it's like he would go this long 2-minute rap about you just sucking on him. And you didn't even know that's what he was saying till you go home. And you're like, this guy's talking about licking what? What? But see, that's what I mean. That's what I liked about. They didn't have to say the word, They didn't have to go and say, like NWA came out later on.
Yeah,
and
they just said it.
You're like, what?
Yeah,
and the funny thing about NWA, their manager was Jewish, who didn't believe in stuff like this. So you're like, whoa.
I wonder if he even really listened to it at first. Like,
no, I think, again, businessmen are businessmen, right? So when it comes to money, as long as they can make the money, that's what they're going to do. And I think Jerry Heller was just all about making the money.
Yeah.
He saw something new. So that's what he did. And even from this day, it's like, I think it took a while for me to start letting my kids listen to that kind of music. Nowadays, they listen to whatever they want. I don't really care. But
right, you couldn't understand it anyway, so
yeah,
it doesn't matter.
What, Drake? You're crying again?
I mean, Drake, I can understand still. No, I well, we'll get into that because I'm probably a lot different from other people my age. I actually do like the music from today. I'm just it's consumed differently. Back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, even, someone dropped an album, you knew it was at least a year, if that, before they came out with something else. So you cherished that. You listened to those songs. You knew them in and out. You were looking at the cover. You knew who produced what. Sometimes they had the lyrics. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
You unfold it, and you're reading it, and sometimes they were wrong, and you find out years later you've just been rapping the wrong lyrics.
Because the person who wrote it didn't really understand
had no
what they were
clue
saying.
what the hell they were saying. Yeah. So
Like,
it's just,
what?
I think it's a lot different now.
I mean,
I listen to songs now, not like albums.
Yes, exactly. I mean, to me, rap has to have a reason with what you're rapping about. And that's what I liked about Run DMC back then. They talk about some guy going into Kentucky Fried Chicken, and then he drops a quarter in his order, small fries, Big Mac. It's like stuff like that back then. As a kid, had me laughing. It's like, yeah, these guys are cool. And then I don't know. Do you consider what they did with Aerosmith a sellout? Because that's when everybody started saying, Run DMC, you're selling out because you're taking this hip hop crossover to rock.
Yeah. I don't think so. I mean, I don't really care for that term, sellout. I mean, what are you doing it for? I mean, you enjoy doing your music and you want the people to hear it and you want the world to hear it. And if you get opportunities to, expand and grow and get your music to, more people, then why the hell not? No, I think it was great. I think it was great for rap music, but at the same token, people can argue that once money got involved, it kind of changed the game for not necessarily the better, but that's anything.
I mean, I think to me, what they did was kind of that crossover, like, hey, hip hop will still be hip hop, but let's try to reach, like the brand of hip hop back then was like you had urban city kids, you had black kids, you know, immigrant kids who was listening to hip hop, right? Now they wanted to reach out these suburb kids, these rich white kids, and I'm going to say it because that's what they were back then.
Yeah.
Let's reach out to them who's listening to Aerosmith, who's listening to Poison. Let's reach out to them. Let's put a little crossover album together with probably back then one of the biggest rock stars there was.
Yeah, at that time.
Or still is.
Yeah.
And they did that. And what happened? That opened a door for groups like Beastie Boys to come out later on. You know, Beastie Boys' album was, I mean, that era is when I kind of probably started crossing over to the West Coast. I think when Beastie Boys came out, what's that other group called? Third Base.
Third Base, yeah.
When they started coming out, I think I started crossing over to the West Coast because I'm not saying this in a racial way whatsoever, but when I listened to rap in the 80s, I listened to black rappers. Then when they started crossing over to the Latinos, the whites, I just couldn't really get into that.
Well, I mean, I got a shout out to Beastie Boys because they were kind of there early on. They were a punk band that kind of, you know, they were down with Rick Rubin, who you know was part of Def Jam and how found Def Jam. And I mean, they definitely were a crossover act, but they were a integral part, I think, of the like you can't tell the story, I think, of rap without talking about the Beastie Boys because
you can't.
Because of their, you know, let's just say it, the color of their skin, they helped, you know, expand hip hop to audiences that otherwise wouldn't have listened to it. And I mean, you know, some people feel some type of way, you know, obviously because they didn't originate it. They weren't from the hood and the ghetto, things like that. But I mean, when you have something good as rap music and hip hop, you can only keep it contained for so long. You know, it's gonna expand. It's gonna make its way out. And I say let it. You know, look where we are now. You know, the hip hop is probably one of the most driving cultures there is right now. Hip hop is pop culture. So
pop culture, it is.
You know.
I mean, they came out in '86, and you know, again, I wasn't trying to offend anybody if I said anything offensive way, but it took, I would say, 10 years for me to realize how much or how good Beastie Boys were. You know, like, again, I was a young kid in the 80s. To me, I'm like, no, you can't be, you know, you it was just, that's just how it was back then. You know, it's like, you're gonna be a rapper, you gotta be a hood or some, you know, you can't be, you know, Third Base, who's, I don't even know what those guys were. Puerto Rican? Were they Puerto Rican?
No, they were white.
They were white.
Yeah, that was MC Search.
Yes.
I forget the other guy's name.
Yes.
But MC Search was also the guy who broke Nas. So
yes,
you know.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
I mean, again, you know, so back then, that's when I started coming over to the West Side. You know, the West Coast. You know, NWA was just starting up, and like Joe said, you couldn't buy the album because they put this big parental advisory sticker on the album.
Was they the first to do that? I'm sorry.
You know, they could have been.
I think that album was
because, you know, right after that first NWA album, that was in '88 when they came out. NWA came out in '88. Two Live Crew. Remember Two Live Crew, group from Miami?
Yeah.
They came out with with an album, and if you guys know Two Live Crew, the stuff they were talking about back, I mean, they were talking about what guys would talk about.
Yeah,
you know? They weren't talking.
It was porn in rap version.
Yeah, they weren't talking about killing anybody or smoking a 40 or all. They're talking about getting high and getting a girl laid. I mean, they were just putting that on album, and that's what they want. But yeah, I think Two Live Crew was the second group to come out with a parental advisory sticker back in the 80s. But yeah, I think they were the first group to do that. Wow. And if you listen to NWA's first album, their first album, it's sad to say because their first album was their best album.
Yeah, it was.
After that, you know, everybody just did their own thing, and it was never the same.
There was never a sophomore album, right? Was that
not with all of them? I mean, yeah, I think Straight Outta Compton was their first album together, and then right after that,
Ice Cube took off, right?
Yeah, Ice Cube said, "You know what? doing my own thing, and then the rest is history.
Yeah.
But yeah, so West Coast rap back then to me was kind of like, and then you got the 80s, the late 80s, where Hammer was kind of doing his thing, and he brought over that dancing type rap.
Yeah, that it's funny. So I was you can't touch this, right? His big hit, right?
Yeah.
That was the first rap song that my dad liked. Right now, my dad had experienced it because of my brother, so he was around for the Run DMC and all that era and didn't care for it. He kind of got it, but not really. He was in his salsa and his jazz and all that.
Nice.
And so we were in Puerto Rico on vacation that summer when that song came out, and when I tell you that song, it was on blast the whole time. That You Can't Touch This is the soundtrack to my childhood vacation in Puerto Rico. I can't hear that song or go to Puerto Rico and not put the two together. It's like that was a smash when my dad liked it.
It was. I mean, no one's gonna lie. I mean, everybody loved that song. I mean, like, I think that album was one of the first. Was that the first rap album to hit? I want to say it was the first rap album to hit platinum and gold, right?
Man, it could be. I don't know. There's so.
I want to say it is.
So
I mean, don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
But like MC Hammer started with that's when no one knew who MC Hammer was, right?
Yeah,
no one knew who MC Hammer was. When he was doing Let's Get It Started, when he was doing Ring 'em, no one's like, who's this guy with this high top fade? And
if you weren't rocking out to MC Hammer, you're lying. That was dope. Anybody that says they weren't, like, come on, MC Hammer is
everybody.
You wish you could dance with your shirt off and yeah. Remember when they made fun of him on In Living Color?
Yes,
I think it was
Tommy Davidson.
Tommy Davidson.
Oh
my God, that is if you haven't seen, go to YouTube, look up Tommy Davidson doing MC Hammer. That is one of the funniest skits.
Yes,
when he gets tied up in his parachute pants. He's like,
can't get out of this. Can't get out of this. But yeah, I mean, like, everybody and their mom loved MC Hammer. But then he kind of brought that different type of music. Again, he kind of crossed over hip hop, rap, and dance, which kind of what the East Coast rap was doing. I don't even know where did MC Hammer I know he's from Oakland, right? Or he lives in Oakland.
He's from Oakland.
That's right.
That's right. I think he's always repped Oakland.
Oakland, yeah.
He did have that kind of weird comeback in the 90s where he tried to do like a little hard stuff, and it was just more awkward.
I think that's when he moved to Atlanta.
Okay.
And he was hanging out with Deion Sanders for a while.
Yeah.
And he did that Too Legit to Quit, Legit to Quit album. Yeah, he did try to come out, and at that time I think he was already losing money because he went broke with that MC that tour that he did where he's paying like. You and I could have been in that tour, and he could have paid us, and we were just doing nothing.
Yeah, that was insane. And he had that, I think it was at MTV Cribs or something. Like, he had that, like, that house was like $30 million house at a time when no one was buying that. A house like that with marble floors and all this craziness.
It's funny because you guys YouTube that MTV scene, the Hammer scene, or the MT Hammer house, because he went into a room, and I swear to God, they didn't edit this, and I don't know why they did it. He went into a room, and he's like, I don't even know what we use this room for. What is this room here for? And then he was like, okay, let's get. And then he just walks into the next room, and I'm like, thinking to myself, man, you got a big ass house, and you don't even know what this room is used for.
He just flexed on everyone, and he didn't even know it.
He's like, I don't know what this room's used for. But again. Rap music back then, I mean, I'm still old school. I'm still old school. I mean, West Coast rap to me kind of started fading out when it got really deep gangster. Tupac came in the late 80s. NWA was kind of like on that falling out. And then Tupac came in the late 80s. Dr. Dre brings him in. And then it started becoming more gangster rap.
Yeah.
Even here in San Francisco, there was a couple of rappers rapping Forte. Probably, I don't know if you know who he is or heard of him.
Yeah.
San Quinn, who's a big RBL posse.
All right, so these guys came out in the 80s here.
They were already getting, these guys, again, doing the same thing Too Short was doing. Hey, listen to my CDs, listen to my CDs. So I remember this kid in high school, his name was Russell, and he was always wearing, you remember back then we were wearing starter jackets?
Yeah.
He would have their names on it. He would have RBL Posse, and he would have, Rappin' Forte. He was a walking billboard.
Gotcha.
And people would ask him, hey, who is this guy? Or who is this group? So, in San Francisco back in the 80s, that's kind of when we started listening to more of the local stuff. Late 80s. I'm talking about late 80s, early 90s. We started listening to the local stuff. RBL was really big in San Francisco. RBL is probably one of the first San Francisco groups that shouted out your district. You know how New York has boroughs?
Right.
RBL did that for San Francisco, your
Right.
Western Edition. One of them is from the Fillmore Western Edition group, and the other one's from 3rd Street. And back then, that was unheard of. You talk about districts and claiming your districts. 3rd Street and Fillmore, Hunters Point and Fillmore, we didn't get along.
Yeah. Those are two kind of separate hoods. Yes. I just know because I lived in one when I first moved here.
When you moved there, it was actually getting better.
Yeah. I moved there right when the gentrification started.
What? So I never knew this area was
everybody that I told that I was moving to Bayview, Hunters Point, they're just like, ooh. I'm like, no, it's more towards Bayview. Ooh. I'm like, it doesn't seem that bad. I jumped on it early. So
for you guys who don't live in San Francisco or moved out of San Francisco, it's now called the Dog Patch.
Yeah.
Dog Patch is a better way of saying 3rd Street or Hunters Point. Yeah. But it was kind of weird because, like, again, you had these two guys who were rival when it comes to neighborhoods who came out with an album together, and they actually the album was good. It was good enough to where I said, you know what, I'm gonna go buy their CD. And back then you go to the store, local rappers had a small section when it comes to music, and you would find everybody there for, like, again, from Rappin' Forte to San Quinn. You would find all their little CDs there. It's probably like a small section, and they came out, to me, they kind of put San Francisco rap on the map. But again, it's totally different from East Coast.
But I do, moving out here, I kind of learned a lot more of, like, the history of the rap out here, like those earlier guys, and I've gone back and listened to it, and I can definitely see the sound that the Bay Area has. The Bay Area definitely does have a distinct sound.
Yes.
Now, if I hear a beat, there was a song I heard the other day from this Asian rapper called Pilo. I think he's Filipino.
Wow.
And I think
those.
And he's from the Bay Area, I believe. And just like the song just came on, I didn't hear it, and just by the sound of the beat and the way he was rapping, I was like, this guy's got to be from the Bay, because now I can hear it. Now I know that. Sure enough, I looked him up, and he's I could think he's been around since the 80s, late 80s, or definitely 90s. But I could be wrong.
I mean, like, besides Too Short, you would say the biggest Bay Area rapper right now is going to be E40. E40 from Vallejo, claiming the Vallejo section, and Vallejo is an outskirt or a city outside of San Francisco. For you guys who don't know where Vallejo is, shout out to Vallejo and E40 and the Click. That's actually the name of the group, the Click. E40 came out a little bit after Hammer started dying out. Like, nobody wanted to listen to Hammer no more. E40 is the reason why the hyphy movement started in San Francisco.
Yep.
He brought in the hyphy movement, and then he brought rappers like Too Short, who's already secured his spot in Bay Area rap history, but he brought Too Short out again. Too Short was coming out with more albums and more singles that actually fit in with what was going on in the rap business here in the Bay Area. And then again, he brought out groups like RBL. He brought out groups like the San Francisco rap groups. He brought them out. He put these guys on the map, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and then can't forget Mac Dre and those guys. He paved the way from him. Now, do you remember? I can't, and because just things come up. But Drake did a song one of his earlier hits, and he pretty much like Jack's, Mac Dre and Rappin' Forte's verses, classic verses from other
Wow.
songs. And he did it saying, he was paying homage or whatever. But when he did the video, people assumed at the very least you would do it here in the Bay, to at least show love to the people you're supposedly paying homage to, and he didn't. And I just remember him getting a lot of crap for that early on, because I don't know. I think that's kind of weak,
Yeah, I don't. I mean, again, I don't listen to Drake. It's not one of my. I just don't. I don't listen to Drake. There's nothing wrong with it, the way he raps. A lot of people like his music. I'm just not a big Drake person. I don't know. It's just just.
I like it.
Yeah. A lot of people like his stuff, and I don't ever dog him as a rapper. I mean, he's actually on top for a reason.
Right.
But it's just I'm old school.
Yeah.
And these new rappers, it's I don't feel it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's okay. Like, it's like these days you can't. Everyone is so sensitive that it's like you can't even have a preference. Like if I say, it's not for me, and it's like, oh, what do you mean? And I'm like, I didn't. It just said I didn't like it. Doesn't mean I hate the person.
Yeah, exactly.
You can still like it. It's just not for me. Like and that's what I think that's for me what was cool about hip hop, because especially early on in those days, it was more about being different. Like in the 80s, you couldn't come out sounding like anyone else, because then you're a biter. Like that's whack. You can't. You got to come up with your own stuff. So I think that's what helped it evolve, because there was just so many different styles. You had the dance rap, you had the real kind of conscious rap, and the lyrical stuff that kind of blew up in the 90s, and the real heavy stuff. So there was a little bit of something for everybody, and everyone kind of found their lane in their pocket. Like, oh, okay, yeah, this is for me, and that's what I think is so great about it.
Another cool thing that you just mentioned, you mentioned two words. You mentioned bite and whack. Those are two words that came out of hip hop in the 80s. It's like if you were copying somebody, you were considered a biter. And this is all East Coast. West Coast is totally different lingo in the West Coast. We say hella out here. Nobody knows what hella is. Like hella, what was hella? Is that hell or heaven? No. Yeah. Hella is short for a lot of. Yeah. Instead of saying hell, instead of saying a lot of, hey, we got hella soda. Yeah. So you New Yorkers, East Coast, hella, it means a lot. Yeah, it's for New Yorkers, it's equivalent to mad. Like, there was mad people there, or I got mad money. It's like I got hella money. But there's hella people there. It's funny you mentioned that, because back then I was talking like that because I was listening to East Coast rap, and the word what up, son? Yeah, son. What's up, son? It's like it's become synonymous with I'm New like York, walking in 8th grade class, we're about to graduate, and I'm like, damn, son, what are you wearing? And then this kid's like, you're not my dad. It's like that whole genre of hip hop, you got a lot out of it. You got a style. A lot of people dressed a certain style. Run DMC brought out the Adidases. Oh man, Adidases was big. The Kango hats. Run DMC, LL Cool J. Yeah. Shout out to Curtis Blow, because he was the first one to wear the Kango hat, but he just didn't get homage for it. Yeah. Run DMC had the leather trench coats. And the fucking the brim, the Houdini style hat. Who the hell would wear a leather? Okay. Who would wear leather trench coats with an Adidas tracksuit? Adidas tracksuit. My brother. Pants. Okay, well, you're from New York. I kid you not. One night, me and my cousin were she was sleeping over, and we were up late watching American Gladiators. I don't know if you guys remember that show. Right? That's right. And it was that came on around midnight or whatever. And my brother comes home. Right now, mind you, it's winter, and he comes in sweating. Okay, so Lord knows what he was doing, but he comes in sweating. He has on a leather trench coat, which is open. Yes. Right? No shirt. Blue track Adidas pants and some blue Adidas strap. And we just looked at him. And was like, I don't even want to know.
I don't know what happened, but that was the style. That was like when I tell you this was what I grew up. It's not just in the movies. This is the stuff I saw.
And it's funny because I've always wanted to ask a New Yorker that. And I think when I first worked with you in the hotel, I was like killing you on all these stupid like, is this how it really is in New York? Do people really dress like this in New York? And now talking about this whole hip hop and rap thing, I mean, we got a lot out of the hip hop. Well, again, verbiage, the way we speak, music, the way we dress, all came out because of hip hop. You know, it's like, I saw people here. We had a store here in the Fillmore district called Harputs. There was way before you got here. Harputs. Right underneath the name, it said Harputs, and the small name, it said Adidas. Okay. Because back in the 80s, Adidas was the thing. You know, you had the Adidas jackets, you had the Adidas tracksuits. And Run DMC came out here one day. The line, if you know where the Fillmore Theater is, Harputs is right around the corner from the Fillmore Theater. The line is coming around Fillmore, coming up Geary.
Oh wow!
Just to see Run DMC back then. And and I remember the next day at school, everybody was walking around with their Adidas gear, their jackets, and they're looking at me. They're like, "Hey, you didn't go to Harpo's yesterday?" Like, dude, the line was like to my house.
Like, no.
I looked out my door and I said, "Are they waiting for the bus?" And like, no, that's the line of Harpo's. I'm like, no.
Wow.
I am not going. But but
they were huge.
Again, fashion. They did a lot of fashion. LL Cool J. He brought out the whole, I'm going to wear a really tight zip up Adidas jacket with just the chain underneath and show my chest.
Yep.
And people try to do it.
There was, that I for sure. The way, specifically the way LL and Run DMC dressed, you know, shout out to Hollis, Queens, where they're from. They dressed how the drug dealers were dressing. They were mimicking those guys. So that's how it was. You know, if you were in places in Queens and Harlem, you know, back in those days, you'll see guys with the fancy cars and the trench coats and these big, you know, Gucci glasses and all that stuff. So they saw that, and they were like you said earlier, they're from the ghetto, they're from the hood, they see this stuff, and this is what they're rapping about, and this is what, you know, now just now they're making the money so that they can buy that. And that's where kind of I think a lot of the confusion and crossover started to happen, because you had a lot of drugs and gangster people involved in the music industry, not to mention the corrupt corporate side of it. So, you know, there was a lot going on in the industry back then, especially when money started coming into it. You know?
I mean, if you were a up and coming rapper, you know, like if you were an LL Cool J up and coming rapper, have no dime in your pocket, and you have lyrics, and you have this guy who's like, "Hey, yo, I'm gonna front up, you know, your first album, but this is what you got to do for me." If you were a young kid, and LL Cool J was what, 17, 16 when he first started rapping?
15 actually.
15, yes. So when you had somebody like that say this to you, and your whole life you wore nothing but, like, you know, worn out shoes and hand-me-downs,
right? And
now you have a chance to actually be the person you want to be by, you know, rapping, and all you have to do is rap. Okay, a drug dealer's funding your stuff. You know, you got the big kingpins who are making sure, like, and I'm pretty sure if you listen to a lot of LL Cool J's old stuff, a lot of the stuff he does mention where he's from. He is mentioning, giving shout outs to the people that probably, now that Joe mentions it, was the one that fronted the money for him. And that's just not LL Cool J. I'm just talking about everybody else back in the game. You know, I'm pretty sure everybody back then was being fronted by drug dealers or big mafia guys.
Right. Yeah. And what it was now too, it was a new outlet, because, you know, for kids growing up in the ghetto, you know, everywhere at that time, the only way out was, you know, sports. And I mean, let's face it, what's the percentage of you becoming famous, you know, a great athlete, you know, slim to none, but, you know, rapping, I could do that. I could rhyme words. I could put words together. You know, I could rap about the stuff I see. This is, you know, this is me. This is stuff we see. So that was another big part of it. You know,
I mean, that's
now everyone wants to do that.
Everybody wants to do it, and they did, and that's why, to me, when I listen to rap, when everyone says rap and hip hop, again, I think East Coast, and you know, we came out with that song. But Same Gang, I think it was the Same Gang. The West Coast came out with a version. where all the rappers in the West Coast put out a song about stop killing each other, and the East Coast came out with a version. I think the East Coast version is called the same. Self-destruction.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
didn't know there was a West Coast one.
yeah, there was West Coast. It's called the same gang for the West Coast. I'll
Okay.
send you the link later on, and I'll put links to that video. And you had people like Eazy-E, West Coast rappers back then. But I don't think that message would have came out if we didn't come out with gangster rap back then.
Yeah.
Because again, like I said, I listen to East Coast rap. Even from this day, I just want to, dance, right?
Yeah,
your
it
body
was all
starts
about
to
the
shake.
party.
It's all about the moves. You listen to West Coast rap, and it's like, I'm about to kick somebody's ass.
Yeah.
That's just how you feel.
Right. Yeah. Because it's almost like a cycle. Because like I was saying before about the gangs in the 70s, when they started the hip hop parties, it was to get away from all that gang violence.
Yes.
And then so these guys, the break dancers that were dancing, instead of fighting, they were doing these dance battles,
Wow.
And then you started getting these crews and cliques doing that instead of actually fighting each other and stabbing each other or whatever. So back then the vibe was kind of like, let's have fun, let's party, let's do this. And, then girls started coming to the party and going, and that's when it kind of really started to take off. But then it went left for whatever reason. I mean, I think the climate and everything going on in the country and the city. And then it just went, like you said, to that gangster, real hard stuff. And then what was unfortunate is that you had people capitalizing on that. Yeah.
I mean,
who weren't from that, but saw the dollar sign in it and went and made it worse than it had to be. Yeah. And unfortunate, we end up losing some great guys like Biggie and Tupac from Biggie, nonsense.
Jam Master Jay,
those guys.
Rest in peace.
Jam Master Jay.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's. I don't. It's terrible. It's terrible in the way where it's like you have these guys who music is the reason why they were who they are. You wouldn't know Tupac if he wasn't a rapper. You wouldn't know Biggie if he wasn't a rapper. And for people, to capitalize off their gain, off their business, off what, their blood, sweat, and tears. Even Tupac mentioned that, my blood, sweat, and tears. And to capitalize off of that, to me, it's kind of like, man, how do you guys live with yourselves every night? How do you sleep every night,
Yeah, and just all the people that are like, these guys are rapping about what they see, and it's not for you to make money off of it. It's for you to, help see what's going on, see that this is a problem like right here in our own country. But and I mean, we can, that's a whole
different topic.
We can go down there.
Whole different topic. But again, like rap to me, it's we wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for hip hop.
No, not at all.
Culture wise, the way we dress, even the way we dress now, it's like, my kids are like, hey dad, I want to get this new Logic sweater or this Future. I'm like, who's that? But they're living what we were living back then. It's like they see these rappers now dressing a certain way, so they want to dress that way. So I never say you can't do that. I can't, cool. I don't go up to my son and go, yo, why you fronting? Why you fronting? You're from the West Coast.
What up, G?
You're from the West. I think G's a West Coast thing, right? G's a West Coast thing.
It is, but it was adopted. We use it on the East Coast.
Is that an East Coast thing?
Yeah. I started noticing it more before I moved out here. Like I'd say early 2000s. Thank you. I know there was a time where there was a lot of people trying to kind of move away from using the N-word. Yeah. And in replacement, I was hearing my G a lot, or my guy, my G. But it's definitely, it's definitely a West Coast thing. But
was it West Coast the first one that said, Audi 5000 G? Were they the first ones that said that?
I don't know, because that's been around for so long. But that was before. It was already a thing before I started using it. But,
I mean, I started, like, again, Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society, when they were saying, all that stuff, that lingo back then, it's kind of like, whoa, Audi 5000, G.
Yeah.
And what's sad is people are still saying that in the 2000s.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's retro now. Yeah. It's cool. It's cool to actually
but these guys are like, they're still wearing the Gazelles. They're still wearing the Gazelles. They still got that old school trench coat that came out back in the days. And they have the nerve to say, yo, man, you see this Adidas fit? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Vintage.
How could I miss it?
This is this is from the 80s. Yeah, it smells kind of like from the 80s too, man.
But you know, it's true what you're saying. It really does. Like it is. I am who I am really because of the whole hip hop culture.
Yes.
Like I look at everything that I'm into now, right? I mean,
Yes.
I'm into customizing and restoring sneakers. Sneakers were a huge part of culture, right?
Yeah.
Adidas, Run DMC, all that. I make beats. Why? Because I love rap music. You know, all this stuff is all the things that, you know, I was immersed in as a kid. That's all the stuff that, you know, I still love to do now, like how I dress, everything, the way we speak. I mean, it's life.
I mean, just imagine a world without hip hop. Just imagine if Russell Simmons never came out with, you know, I mean, I'm talking about like no breakdancing, no rap, none of that.
Yeah.
We'd have a boring life.
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't.
Hey Joel, you hear that new Garth
imagine.
Brooks? That Achy Breaky is pretty cool, man. That's a pretty cool song.
I've been listening to rock music. I would have been like,
jam to that. I would have killed myself.
I would have been all kissed out. I would have had when I had hair, it would have been all teased and like.
Hey, that's how my hair looked back in the days.
Oh man, you should have had that picture of you,
little tease
with the glasses and the mullet.
No glasses, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
But see, okay, let's get this straight. It wasn't a mullet. Okay.
Was it a shag?
It was called DuckTales back then, right? It was called DuckTales. It was just this little tail, and then back then it was the thing. Okay.
But it was like a slight little kind of flat top sort of thing.
Over and then
yeah.
But it was the country singers that turned it into a mullet.
They let it go. They let it go long, and it was.
You know what? This is getting a little shaggy, so I'm gonna shave this part off, and I'm gonna keep this part going. And
business in the front, party in the back.
Exactly. Yes, we all had that back in the 80s, and that was towards the end of our b-boy stage. Because back in our b-boy stage, and I don't know about you, but did you ever wear breakdancing shoelaces? Did you ever put those in your shoes?
Breakdancing shoe, like the fat laces?
Fat laces,
yeah. That would that was the thing back in the days.
That was
for sure.
We would get our shoes, and this is something we picked up from a kid in school. We would put the breakdancing laces, and if you had more than one color, you were cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would try to have the yellow and then the fluorescent orange, and then we would take a sock and we would fold the sock, and then we would stick it in the tongue. So as soon as you put your shoes on, those laces were popping out.
Oh, nice.
So it's like people were like, "Yo, man, your laces are popping out." Like,
yeah,
that's right. But then you had that that one kid's like, "Yo, man, your sock is showing."
Mm-hmm.
You got to put it underneath the tongue, bro.
Yeah.
Oh, son, you got to put it underneath the tongue, not between the tongue and the laces.
No, New York, they're just gonna take your sneakers.
Yeah,
that was definitely a thing. That when I was little, that was a fear because sneakers were such a huge part of the culture. The Jordan sneaker, was a thing. The first pair of Jordans I ever got were the Jordan 3s in '88. I want to say. Don't ask me how I pulled that one off. My mom got them for me. I remember till this day, $119 for those sneakers. Yes, I was a spoiled brat.
119.
Okay,
yeah.
I wore those sneakers for about a good 10 years though. I wore them to the ground, but it was also like you can only wear these when you're with me or your dad, or your brother. You can't go outside and first off, you're not going to play in them outside to begin with. But even still, you had to really like your bike, your skateboard, like that it was real. Like you had to watch your back because some older dude's gonna come by. Hey, shorty, let me borrow your bike. I'll be right back. Mm-hmm. Like, all right, but just make sure you come back. Yeah, I'm gonna go to the store.
Real quick.
Just like right there, I'm gonna come. You want something? I'll get you some. You want a bag of chips? And then bye bike. Like
you're sitting there like. He said he'll come back, Mom. He said he'll come back.
Sun's going down. No, he's gonna come back. I know he is.
I trust him, Mom. I trust him. 2 days later, you see him like, "Yo, can I get my bike back?" What bike?
What bike?
What bike? This is my bike, son.
Straight Debo. Like that's why movies like Friday and all that, like,
oh my God, yeah.
They hit home because that stuff really happened. Growing up, like Debo was a guy in everybody's neighborhood. That was that guy that took your stuff and you were either, one of his lackeys or you ran from whenever you see him. Yeah, exactly.
He claimed your stuff no matter what you said.
Yep.
you know, what was it? I forget the guy's name. And Friday, he's like, "Yo, Debo, can I get my chain back?" "What chain?" "It's my chain." It's like, "It's my grandmama's chain." But yeah, we had that too. I mean, like my mom and dad was smart back in the days because, you know, Joe's getting spoiled with $119 pair of Jordans. I didn't get my first pair of $100 shoes till I think I was a junior in high school, and they were Ewings, Patrick Ewings back in the day. Nice. They were Adidas's. But my mom and dad will take me to like Kmart.
Kmart, yeah.
Kmart, and Kmart had a brand called Pro Wings.
Oh wow.
And Pro Wings. Oh no, sorry. What was Kmart's brand? Kmart had a brand that everybody knew you got those shoes from Kmart, right? So here I am, this kid in the 80s wearing these Kmart shoes with these fat laces, thinking I was the sickest, right? And then you have these kids who were wearing, like, you know, Nike wasn't really big back then, but, you know, you had the Stan Smith, you had the, what's that shell toe Adidas shoes that people were wearing back then? Was it not the Chuck Taylors?
No, wasn't it the?
Was that the Sam? Okay.
Yeah.
But they were wearing those shoes, and here I am wearing these, like, you know, $20 shoes with laces, and you had that one kid in the corner like, "Yo, your mom and dad's not gonna, you know, buy you shoes." But like you said, if you wore those shoes, you know, people will take your stuff.
Yep. You know, it's funny. You just reminded me of this story. When I was in junior high school, there was these two twins that had just moved from like Albania, Yugoslavia, something like that, right? And they had on these like Ninja Turtle sneakers, right? Now, mind you, Ninja Turtles were the shit, right? They were, but you know, junior high school, you're not gonna wear Ninja Turtle sneakers to school, right? It's embarrassing, right? So, needless to say, kids were cruel, and they got a lot of shit. They took a lot of shit, but what these kids didn't know was that these two boys were super rich. They had Ninja Turtle sneakers because that's what was cool, and where they came from, everybody loved Ninja Turtles, and they were rocking Ninja Turtle sneakers. The next year, these two kids, when I tell you, all they had were Jordans.
Oh wow!
And like, yeah, I mean, it was like it was crushing. So
you'd walk up to them like,
never
"Hey,
judge a book by its cover."
When's the new Jordans coming out? I don't know. My dad's getting them right now.
I'll let you know when I get them. Like,
it's not even been released. It's coming. It's coming. But yes, good fun topic that we had today.
Yeah, man.
80s. I mean, there was a lot of people that we missed. You know, we missed Ice-T.
Ice-T.
Big shout out to Africa Bombada. I mean, those probably one of the main groups that I listened to back then. One thing about the movie, Melly Mel. Yeah. Let me ask you this: in the movie Beat Street, this is what kills me a lot. And I watched the movie, and it's one of my favorite movies out there. When he's rapping at the end of the scene, and he's rapping, and all of a sudden, you know, Grandmaster Flash comes in, and Furious Five's in the background with him. It's like, okay, his voice doesn't change. It's like, were you lip syncing that first part of the song? And then when Grandmaster Flash comes on, they just take over the same lyric. It's like, were you guys trying to front? Were you fronting back then?
Probably. I would have to watch it again. I can't. And you know, damn, we didn't talk about Grandmaster Flash, who was responsible for the cutting and scratching. He was that whole merry-go-round thing that Kool Herc did. Grandmaster Flash said he could never really get it, and so he was kind of like a tech geek and was messing with stuff, and you know, accidentally touched the turntable, which was unheard of. And he's like, wait a minute, I have full control, and started playing with it and realized he can do this and that, and the rest is history.
I mean, even things like if you didn't have, you know, turntables back in the days, if you didn't have your own stuff, you had guys like Slick Rick and KRS-One and Dougie Fresh who was doing their own little beatbox in the background, you know, like
Biz Markie, and
I can't afford turntables, so here's a little, you know, kind of thing. It's like that was
banging on the table.
Oh my God, I would get detention for that every Friday. But yeah, I mean, again, part of hip hop culture. You know, you wouldn't be beatboxing. You wouldn't be walking down the street if you know didn't listen to this kind of stuff back then. You wouldn't be pounding on the table with a nickel in one hand and your knuckles in the other hand trying to make a beat. And it's, to me, if there was no hip hop, if East Coast didn't come out with what they did back then, and the West Coast came out a little bit later, it would have been a big difference. Because I think a lot of West Coast rappers got their influence from East Coast rappers.
Yeah, for sure. And then I think they started to say, wait a minute, we got our own sound, we got our own vibe. Like let's do our own thing, and that's what I love. That's what I love. And I mean, next I guess next episode we'll talk about when it starts making its way towards the South and that whole change, because that was an explosion that South, is still going strong today.
That's the cool thing about hip hop. It's like from what we started in the East and kind of made our way to the West.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't even touched the South.
Yeah.
The South, it's like Birdman, all those guys.
Yeah.
Those guys are all South. Master P.
All and like you had mentioned before, Two Live Crew, I mean, technically, they were from the South, even though they were considered East Coast in the early days, but they were from the South.
They were one of probably first Southeast groups to come out,
Yeah.
You wouldn't have Nelly if it wasn't for Master P.
Seriously. And now, I mean, you look at the South, Atlanta is probably dominating rap, has been for, I don't know, last 10 years, if not more.
Before we end the show, I'm going to ask your opinion. Mm-hmm. 80s rap group or rap person only, okay? Don't extend past the 80s. Who is the best, not as of popularity, but as a person, who is the best rapper / turned into an actor that you can think of? Only in the 80s.
Only the 80s.
I'll give you my two. My two, first one's gonna be LL Cool J. I mean, from what he was as a rapper to all of a sudden change his acting game to like, hey, I'm just gonna act.
Yeah.
I like the way he acts. I would say Ice Cube is a far second, and the only reason why I say that is because Ice Cube can't get out of that thug mentality role.
Yeah.
He can't. LL Cool J broke out of that role. He can be LL Cool J, but he also can be. You want him to be like Steve Smith, he'll be Steve Smith.
Right. Yeah.
Ice Cube, they have to make a character around his mentality.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard. But I like Ice Cube. Ice-T is kind of the same way for me when it comes to.
Yeah, I was gonna say probably I would say Ice-T and Ice Cube. I mean, I agree with you as far as Ice Cube. Yeah, he every role he plays, it's pretty much Ice Cube.
Yeah, it's Ice Cube.
Ice-T, I really I didn't like him in New Jack City. It was a little cringe for me. And then I think he's in Law and Order and one of those. But I mean, from the 80s, LL's probably got to be the best. I don't know that there were really that many guys that made that crossover from the 80s. I'm trying to think of maybe even late 80s, but yeah, he would have to be the best.
I mean, late 80s, we can go down Tupac, who did a couple stuff.
Yeah. Well, in that case, I mean, I'd have to say Tupac. I think.
But again, Tupac had to play a Tupac role. He had to be, they had to make a.
I don't know necessarily though, because he went to an art school. Like a lot of people, I don't know if they know about Tupac. Tupac didn't really become gangster till he started rapping and got money and started really kind of dealing with those type of people. But he was a pretty good actor, I would say, because he did Poetic Justice, and he was typecast for sure. It's just a shame that we wouldn't get to see what he would have become, because I think he would have evolved as an actor for sure.
He would. For all you females out there, I didn't forget about Queen Latifah, probably one of the best female rappers that came out, who became a female actress. Queen Latifah is probably also Queen one Latifah. Of the, I actually like her. I'm going to put her above LL Cool J.
Hell yeah.
Because what she did in TV and in movies
and Broadway, she was in Chicago.
She was in Chicago.
Yeah, she's done a lot, and even in producing. Oh man, what's the name of that show? She's
that Living Single.
No, something recent. Something recent, but Living Single. I mean, that was a classic sitcom.
Khadijah.
Khadijah. Shout out Cool Front.
But so to me, hip hop culture is a big culture to me, and I wouldn't be probably where I am right now if it wasn't for hip hop culture. I mean, You know, I did mention in a couple podcasts before, I still listen to island music, but there's a reason why I listen to that. But I still do listen to hip hop, and when I do listen to hip hop, I go back to the '80s, to the midnight. You know, it really depends on my mood. If I want to just chill and relax, I'm going back to the '80s. I'm going to New York. I'm listening to New York rap. And if I'm gonna go play basketball, I'm about to go work out in the gym, I'm throwing on some, you know, some NWA or some Tupac, because that's what you need to listen to.
Yeah. You know, I had this conversation recently with a friend of mine, and I was like, you know, I think at this point now, I have to be in the mood, in a particular mood, to listen to 90s rap, particularly because I think I listened to it so much, like 80s and 90s, like as a kid, that's all I didn't watch TV. I came home and I turned on my radio, and it was just music. So so now, and you know, also I like to make beats and stuff too. So I want to kind of keep my mind clear, I think is the best way. But for sure, if I'm on a road trip, like you said, if you're working out, there's just I just need, you know, 90s rap. There's just something about it. Like it's nothing better. It is still to me the best era. 80s, 90s.
I mean, 90s gave us Eminem, gave us Trap Called Quest, gave us all these cool back in the days. But that's gonna be for the next podcast. This is part one.
This is part one
of what are we calling it? Hip hop.
The
generation of hip hop, or history of hip hop.
Evolution, history of hip hop. Yeah.
Genre from late 70s to early 80s is what we touched on. So if you guys are gonna leave a comment and say, hey, you forgot this, you forgot that, just check the year that rapper came out, because we went as far as, you know, early ages of Tupac in the late 80s to pretty much whatever, all the 80s that we can think of back in the New York days.
There's just so much that, you know, it wasn't we didn't leave anyone out on purpose.
No, we didn't. It's just this is probably gonna be a 5-parter right here. So
seriously,
we shall see. Yeah. But I want to give a shout out to Joe for you know, putting it out there, talking about his New York lifestyle and what it was like living in New York. And for us West Coast people, that's something that we always wanted to touch on. Like, what was it like living in New York? And, you know, it's like,
it was a trip, man.
You know, it's different because, like, we here in San Francisco, we there's, you know, we have the gay movement, and that's probably the biggest thing San Francisco has when it comes to culture or, you know, positive movements moving forward. But when you can get like the rap or the hip hop movement, and like I said, man, I still listen to hip hop from the 80s. Rap, breakdancing, you know, it's like that's what it is.
I definitely feel, you know, lucky and privileged to have, you know, and it's weird to say it now, you know, to grow up where I did, because at the time, you know, in projects, in the Bronx, and it's just the slums and all that, and but you know, because of hip hop, because of culture, you don't really see it that way. We're all in the same boat. And I had a great, I think, childhood, despite where I was. And a lot of that was because of hip hop and culture and everything that it brought. So, you know.
And the cool thing about hip hop, it doesn't hit, you know, New York, San Francisco, LA. It hits around the world. I mean, if you listen to like overseas rap, Philippines rap, these guys are rappers who live in the slums of the Philippines, who they have the same thing that we were talking about. The only thing they can do is become some kind of hip hop artist to try to get them, you know, it's like you're either an athlete or you're not, kind of deal, right? So what's the best thing we can do is let's make music. Let's, you know, and there's a couple of Filipino rappers that I do follow, that I do listen to, just because I want to hear their story and how they came from the slums to where they are right now. I'll leave their links down below when we leave this out, because there's quite a few of them. But you know, it's like hip hop is a big thing, and I want to say hip hop is not even, back then it was a culture thing, but now it's just more of it's a lifestyle. You know, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah, it really is, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
I'm glad to have lived through it, and then once we get to the 90s and 2000s. You're going to have to do all the talking, because after Eminem and a few people, I don't know what else is there.
It'll be good. Don't
But like
worry. And I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you to listen to some rap songs today. I'm gonna just start
party
flooding you.
party
I'm gonna
line.
start. I'm gonna just start flooding you with YouTube videos.
Yes.
We're gonna find something in today's rap that you like.
I tell you right now, if it wasn't for TikTok, I wouldn't know any of these rap music. I wouldn't. That TikTok is helping me a lot with this new genre of rap music.
Yeah.
You know, my youngest son is like, "Oh, that's a TikTok song." Oh,
Well,
is it?
okay. Well, all right. Good. This is actually a question for you.
Yeah.
You have teen boys now.
Yes.
I remember being your boy's age and how my dad felt about my music, right? When we're talking about MC Hammer and stuff.
Yes.
Is there anything that they listen to? Do you even pay attention to anything that they
No.
listen to that's even remotely good to you, or
No.
you just ignore it
Because
altogether?
you got to remember back when we were growing up, back in the days, if we were taking long drives in a car,
Mm-hmm.
and your dad played whatever song, like you were saying, he was playing classical Latin music, and
Yeah.
right. So back then, I would have to beg my dad, "Hey, Dad, put this CD in." Or back then it was tapes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Put this
Yeah.
tape in. So it was music he hated. My
Mm-hmm.
dad would from this day would not even listen to rap. He
Yeah.
never got into the MC Hammer fade like your dad did.
Yeah.
Never did. So the new generation kids these days, now they have AirPods. They have their own little, they have their own little devices. So they're
Yeah.
listening,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
listening to it, and I can't hear it.
Right. Right.
Right?
Right. Right.
They don't say, "Hey, Dad, can you put on this radio station because this is the cool radio station," the way I did growing up. You
Right.
know,
Right. Gotcha.
and so it's like I don't hear their stuff. I don't. I don't.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for, again, TikTok, even the local radio stations that we don't even listen to,
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
if
Who
I hear
listens
the
to radio
local,
anymore?
yeah, who listens to radio? But yeah, their stuff, and like back then, it's like if my dad heard me listening to NWA, it's like, dude, turn it off.
Yeah. 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 For
Turn
sure.
it off. And I'm pretty
I
sure the rap now is having stuff like that I don't even know about.
Right. You probably wouldn't, like I said, you probably wouldn't even be able to understand it
No.
with all the new slang and stuff. But yeah, I remember getting a Tupac CD at the mall one time with my parents, and we got in the car, and my dad's like, "So let's hear it," and I'm like, "Oh shoot," and I'm like,
Which album was it?
I forget the name of the album, but it's the one that had I want to say Brenda's Got a Baby.
Okay.
It had. So the only three songs on there that I could possibly play for him were Brenda's Got a Baby, Dear Mama,
Yeah.
and I Get Around. I didn't want to play I Get Around because it was still a little kind of pushing it.
Yeah.
So I went with Dear Mama.
Well,
And
that was the Hail Mary album too, right?
no, that was Machiavelli. That came
Machiavelli.
later.
Okay.
Yeah. This was early Tupac. This was those first kind of three hits before he really blew up into Dre and all that kind of thing. He was still it was just out of the digital underground era.
I'm looking it up right now to see which album. It could either be All Eyes on Me or the
Actually, look up Strictly for My, and I don't want to say it. Can't say it.
Yes. Is it Me Against the World? I think it was Me Against the World. But yeah, so you were saying, so Tupac, that's the only thing you can play for your dad.
So yeah, so I'm like, oh, what am I gonna do? And so we played here it is, hold on one second.
I could never.
Keep Your Head Up. That's what it was. Keep Your Head Up.
That was his first. That was his first album.
Yeah, and it was his first album. It was Keep Your Head. It was a pretty bad album, honestly. That was like the only song on there. It was Keep Your Head Up and I Get Around, and then the rest were terrible. Yes. And I played Keep Your Head Up, and I was just crossing my finger, and he actually loved it. And then thankfully, though, at that time, he really only had a limit of one song that he could listen to. So it was like, all right, enough of that. Put on mine.
Keep Your Head Up has that little, they do that little hook where they have that little 70s singing in the background.
Right, that Marvin Gaye sample. So it was just like, it was right in his bag. I was like, yes, because my dad was big Motown soul,
I like this.
Like, oh, okay. He was testing.
Yeah.
If he would have just let it go to the next song, it would have been a rap. It's like, okay, you got to return this.
Literally a rap. You're done.
Yeah.
You're listening to Paco Prieto from Puerto Rico. But yeah, so my kids listen to things that I don't know what they're listening to. Like I said, coming into the new era of rap, it's totally different from what what we grew up listening to. We used to have to sneak, like things. Hey, Joe, dub this CD for me or dub this tape for me. Because that's how we did it back then. Now with the digital world, everything's just like download this song and
say send me that. Send me that song.
If not, you just look on the web and you can find a way to listen to it. Then it's totally different era. Something, again, moving forward, we can talk about when we come to the next genre. Next genre, we're going to talk about the 90s and 2000s, I guess early 2000s when it comes to that rap genre. And I think after 95, I'm most likely going to lose it. I'll be like, okay, Joe, it's all yours.
You're just going to get up and walk away.
My camera will accidentally die again. Nope, I'm here. Camera turned off on purpose.
You hear Game of Thrones music in the background.
You notice how I put our little
I did actually. I noticed that earlier. I was I think that's pretty snazzy.
I don't know what these albums are right here, so I was like, I'm gonna put our little thing right here.
Yeah, cool. No, I like it, man. Thank you.
Still don't know who this guy is. I don't know who he is. He's creeping me out.
He's a cameraman.
Creeping me out. But want to thank everybody for listening to the Ordinary Joe's podcast. We did miss a podcast last week. There was a lot of things going on. We blame the NFL. Both of our teams lost last week, so that's the reason why we were like, you know what, forget it. I don't want to do this. But we will discuss more into the history of hip hop and rap next week. Definitely pay attention. For you guys who are listening to us on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that, keep supporting us on these channels. If you're watching us on YouTube, definitely, watch it on YouTube. Tell your friends, tell everybody about it. This is definitely a topic that we can go on for days. We're almost 2 hours into this podcast and we're still talking about it.
And
that's why we have to break it up in parts. So
and again, thank you guys for hanging in there, and appreciate you guys hitting us up, asking us, hey, what's up? Why no podcast this week? And thanks for being understanding, and hope you guys enjoy.
Quick thing too, Joe has a new podcast out, and I listened to it today. Plug your podcast, Joe.
It is the Man a Few Words podcast. Right now, it is only on Anchor and Spotify. I'll let you guys know when it's on all the other platforms. But it's just pretty much kind of similar to what we got going on here. But when you talk about stuff like hip hop, and there's just so much content and things you forget, so that'll kind of just be like the extra runoff stuff that I remember to ramble about. There'll be short 20-minute ones, nothing too long. If you got a short ride to work, just throw it on, listen to it.
You guys listen to it. It's very, very interesting topic that he brings up with Mike Tyson and is it Mayweather?
Roy Jones Jr.
Same thing. Listen to it. It's pretty interesting. I just listen to it. Check him out on his podcast channel. And again, until next week, we will discuss more about the hip hop and everything else. Thank you guys for staying up and listening to us.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good week. And
you too, buddy. Thank you again.
Next week,
doing all the work you do.
It's going to be a little bit bitter because next week, my San Francisco 49ers is playing Joe's New York Giants. So depending on that outcome and how things are, this hip hop thing might be very hip hopish.
If my camera is like cracked down the middle, you'll know who won and who lost.
My camera might not even turn on,
You just may listen to me next week.
You might just hear like, you're right.
You're gonna hear grunts. Like,
you're gonna hear the real hip hop of me come out like, fuck Drake.
Drake. Maybe I just don't watch the game until after the podcast.
No way. All right, guys. Everyone have a great week. Thanks for listening. Till next week. See you guys.
Peace.
The Ordinary Joe's podcast.